I knew my Saturday was off to a bad start the second I saw the shattered glass glittering under my car. It was my 2008 Dodge Charger, parked exactly where it had been for the last week and a half, my own damn driveway. I stood there in my slippers, coffee in hand, mouth half open, staring at the mangled mess of my side mirror, a spiderweb crack across the driver's side window, and a thick dent running across the front fender. It looked like someone had rammed a shopping cart into it on purpose. But the real gut punch came when I saw the note taped to my windshield with a neon pink post-it. I peeled it off and read the scribbled handwriting, "Vehicle in violation. Move immediately. Final warning, HOA." No name. No signature. Just that. I knew exactly who it was. Regina Jeffries, the queen of the Oak Ridge Pines HOA and self-proclaimed protector of property values. She had been on my case since the day I moved in 2 years ago. First, it was the shade of my front door. Then the color of my mailbox. Last month, she tried to fine me for excessive wind chimes. I don't even own a damn wind chime. But this was different. This was vandalism. I crouched to get a better look at the damage. The scrape across the fender was deep metal exposed. My mirror was hanging by its wires and the cracked window looked fresh. There was a trail of scratches on the driveway like something had dragged a tool across it. I felt my jaw tighten. Someone had done this deliberately. And then I saw her, Regina, walking her yappy little Pomeranian named Biscuit, wearing her usual oversized sunglasses and a wide straw hat like she was patrolling a beach, not a suburban cul-de-sac. "Morning, Nathan," she called out, her voice syrupy and smug. "Glad to see you finally noticed the issue with your vehicle." I stared at her. "You did this." Her smile didn't even flicker. "It's an eyesore. It's been there for over a week. It violates Section 12, Paragraph 3 of the HOA agreement. Non-operational vehicles must be moved within 72 hours. I've documented it. You've been warned." "My car runs fine," I snapped. "I work night shifts. I don't drive it during the day, and I don't owe you an explanation." She shrugged like I was an idiot child. "I gave you ample warning." I took a step closer. "So you smashed it?" "I did what I had to do," she said, as casually as someone discussing weeding a garden. "We have standards here." I almost dropped my coffee right there. "You're admitting to vandalism." "No, I'm enforcing compliance," she said, eyes narrowing. "You should be thanking me. Now maybe your vehicle won't drag down the whole block." I didn't say another word. I just turned around, walked inside, and shut the door behind me before I said something I'd regret. But I wasn't letting this go. I spent the rest of the day going over my security footage. I had installed a pair of cameras a year ago after someone keyed my truck. Regina had claimed it was kids from the next street over, but I'd had my suspicions even then. I poured myself a stiff drink, pulled up the camera feed, and watched the footage from Friday night. My heart rate picked up as the timestamp ticked past 2 in the morning. There she was, Regina, in her ridiculous hat. She crept up my driveway with a flashlight in one hand and something long and metal in the other, looked like a tire iron. She walked up to the driver's side window, glanced around, then jabbed it straight into the side mirror with a crack. She worked fast, bashing the fender, scraping the paint, and then calmly walking away like it was just another late-night stroll. I stared at the footage, jaw clenched. This wasn't just vandalism. This was deliberate, premeditated destruction of private property. I saved the footage to 3 different drives, uploaded it to the cloud, and printed screenshots. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls, one to the police department and one to the Oak Ridge Pines HOA board. Most of them were Regina's friends, but not all. I figured it was time to rattle some cages. By Monday morning, Officer Delgado was on my doorstep reviewing the footage with a tight frown. "She actually said she did it?" he asked, rewinding the footage for the 3rd time. "Right to my face," I said. "Said she was enforcing compliance." He shook his head. "This is felony vandalism, Nathan. And she's on the HOA board." "She's the HOA board." He sighed. "We'll be sending her a notice." "You willing to press charges?" "Oh, I'm more than willing," I said. "The best part? I didn't even have to tell Regina. She got the notice delivered in person. I watched from my front porch later that afternoon as a patrol car pulled up in front of her house. She came out all flustered, Biscuit barking like the world was ending, and started waving her arms at the officer. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her face turned a shade of red I hadn't seen outside of cartoons. I didn't wave. I just sipped my coffee and watched. Later that evening, an emergency HOA meeting was announced via email. Mandatory attendance, it said. Regarding recent events. I showed up 10 minutes early, documents in hand, printed screenshots, a written statement, and a copy of the community bylaws highlighted and tabbed. Most of the chairs were already filled with neighbors murmuring about Nathan's car and Regina's breakdown. Only a few people looked at me with sympathy. The rest? They kept their distance like I was radioactive. Regina strutted in like nothing had happened, wearing a blazer 2 sizes too small and a fake pearl necklace, followed by her 2 best friends from the board, Tina and Carol, both equally uptight. She cleared her throat. "Let's begin," she said, pretending like there wasn't a police report with her name on it. I raised my hand. Regina rolled her eyes. "We'll take questions at the end, Nathan." "It's not a question," I said. "I'm filing formal action against the HOA and its board president for criminal damage to private property." I walked to the front and slapped the photos onto the table. "And I have security footage to back it up." Gasps rippled across the room. One of the newer residents, a young guy named Derek, leaned forward to get a better look. "Is that Regina?" Regina's smile twitched. "This is a smear campaign. That footage could be anything. It was time-stamped. It was you. And you admitted it to me in broad daylight," I said. "I've got audio too." Regina opened her mouth, but Tina touched her arm. "Regina, maybe we should talk." "No. He violated regulations. We have rules. That car was on my property." I snapped. "Running. Legal. Insured. And clean, by the way." She blinked, thrown for a second. "And now it's damaged because you decided to play vigilante," I added. "I'm pressing charges. And the HOA is covering the repair costs, or I'm taking this to small claims court and every local news outlet that'll listen." Silence. Then Carol, who had been quiet until now, cleared her throat. "We'll have to review the footage," she said nervously, "and consult with legal." "Take your time," I said. "I've already started the paperwork." I walked out of that meeting knowing I just kicked over a hornet's nest. But I wasn't backing down. Regina had gotten away with bullying this neighborhood for years. She picked the wrong guy this time. I was going to make sure she paid literally and that everyone on that board knew I wasn't someone they could push around. And I was just getting started. By Tuesday afternoon, I had 2 quotes from body shops, both north of $4,000. The officer handling my case, Delgado, called to confirm the footage had been submitted into evidence. He let me know the district attorney's office was reviewing the case for possible prosecution. It wasn't just misdemeanor vandalism anymore. The footage, combined with Regina's casual confession, showed intent crossing into felony territory. I made sure to forward everything to the HOA's insurance contact listed in our community portal. I didn't expect a response, but I wanted the paper trail to be airtight. The neighborhood was still buzzing from the meeting, and I noticed more heads turning when I walked my trash out. Even the people who used to avoid eye contact now gave me short nods. A couple of them even stopped to ask, carefully, how bad the car damage was. I gave them the facts, nothing more. I wanted the truth to do the heavy lifting. Wednesday morning, I got a letter shoved under my front door. No postage, no envelope, just a printed sheet on HOA letterhead. It was a notice of suspension, claiming I was temporarily stripped of participation privileges due to ongoing litigation against the board, as if I was the problem. I called the HOA's general counsel listed at the bottom. A receptionist answered and, after a brief hold, transferred me to a man whose voice was lined with annoyance. "I'm calling about the illegal suspension letter," I said. "I'm a homeowner. You can't revoke my rights because I filed a police report." There was a pause. "Mr. Brooks, the board has discretion to—" "Actually, no," I interrupted. Not unless you've amended the bylaws since March. I have a copy of the latest revision. Section 4, subsection A. No homeowner can be barred from meetings, voting, or participation without a 2/3 community vote. And that hasn't happened. He was quiet for a beat. Then, I'll have to verify that. Please do. And I've already copied my attorney on the letter you sent. If I get another one like it, we'll be discussing civil liability. I hung up and forwarded the letter to a friend of mine, a real estate attorney named Maya, who owed me a favor. She wasn't HOA specific, but she was sharp and fast, and she'd already looked over the footage. Her response came within the hour. They're panicking. Let them. I'll draft a formal demand letter for the repairs. That night, around 6, I heard a knock. I opened the door to see an older man in a beige windbreaker and khakis. He introduced himself as Harold Cohen, one of the original founders of the HOA, now retired from the board but still living 2 streets over. I heard what happened, he said, I scanning the dented Charger in my driveway. Can we talk? I invited him in. Once seated, he didn't waste time. I never liked Regina. She forced herself into the presidency 5 years ago by rewriting quorum requirements and pushing people out with technicalities. Most folks didn't even realize they'd lost voting rights until it was too late. I leaned forward. So this has been going on a while? He nodded. She's been consolidating control. She rewrote the landscaping rules to target one guy who refused to trim his hedges. Find another woman into bankruptcy over a flagpole. She even had a fence torn down last winter while the owners were on vacation. Claimed it was non-compliant. Turned out it was approved 10 years ago. But no one had the energy or resources to fight her. Why come forward now? He looked at me with tired eyes. Because you're the first person who documented it. And because you're not backing down. It's about time someone did. I asked him if he'd be willing to speak up at the next meeting. His answer was simple: you get her out, I'll help put something better in. The next HOA meeting wasn't for another 3 weeks, but I didn't wait. I printed flyers, just a single page with the phrase, "Is this the HOA you want?" and 4 stills from the security footage. I didn't add my name. I didn't have to. I walked the neighborhood at dusk and quietly taped them to mailboxes not in them, since that's a federal offense. I stuck to the public sidewalk and kept it legal. It was subtle, but it worked. By the weekend, the entire street was talking. Saturday morning, I got a knock from Tina, the board member who had tried to cut Regina off during the meeting. She wasn't smiling. "We need to talk," she said, stepping past my threshold without waiting. I didn't like it, but I let her speak. "You've made your point," she said. "But you're dragging everyone down with her." I folded my arms. Dragging everyone down? She smashed my car. She made a mistake. No. A mistake is forgetting a meeting. This was calculated. And now she's trying to suspend my rights as a homeowner. Tina sighed. The board didn't vote on that. She did it herself. Then she's acting unilaterally. You're all liable. She looked at me for a long second. What do you want? I want the HOA to pay for my repairs. I want Regina removed from the board. I want the bylaws returned to their original form before she rewrote them behind everyone's backs. And I want a public admission that what she did was illegal. That's a lot. Not if you compare it to what she's cost this neighborhood in lawsuits, fines, and fear. Later that day, I got a call from Maya. She'd sent the demand letter. It included the repair estimates, the footage, the transcript of Regina's admission, and relevant HOA bylaw citations. She gave them 5 business days to respond before she filed in small claims court. Monday came with a surprise. A sheriff's deputy arrived at Regina's house with a criminal summons. She wasn't arrested yet, but the paperwork was clear. The state was pressing charges. I watched from across the street as she stood in her doorway clutching a silk robe like it was armor. Her voice was raised, but the deputy didn't flinch. He handed her the envelope and left. She threw it onto her porch step like it was radioactive. By Wednesday, the HOA issued a formal statement. It was emailed to all residents and posted to the community bulletin board. It said that Regina Jeffries had been suspended from her duties pending legal review and that the board would be holding a vote to formally remove her at a special session the following week. And tucked at the bottom? We have agreed to compensate Nathan Brooks for all vehicle damage as part of an insurance settlement. We are reviewing our procedures to ensure that such incidents never occur again. Harold showed up at my house that night with a six-pack of cold beer and a grin that looked more like relief than celebration. "You did it," he said, cracking one open. "She's finished." I didn't say anything at first. I was still processing it. The payout didn't undo the damage, but it made it right. The public statement wasn't just words, it was accountability. And the funny thing? I started getting knocks from other homeowners. Quiet ones. People dropping off old meeting minutes, copies of complaints they'd filed and been ignored over, even a few anonymous notes with dates and names. I set up a folder on my laptop and started organizing it all. Because if Regina had built a system that enabled her to act like a queen, she hadn't done it alone. And I wasn't done cleaning house. By the time the special session rolled around, the neighborhood had changed. Lawns still looked the same, driveways still held their usual sedans and pickup trucks, but the air carried a different tension. It wasn't fear anymore, it was curiosity, a quiet hunger for answers that people had been too cautious to ask for before. For the first time in years, the HOA wasn't the one calling the shots. People were watching, questioning, and most importantly, talking to each other. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening in the community rec center. I showed up with Maya, who despite not being a resident was invited after I forwarded the board a notarized request to allow legal representation during any discussion involving my case. They didn't argue. At this point, they were more interested in containing the damage than enforcing their usual gatekeeping. The folding chairs were full before the meeting even started. Couples stood in the back, teenagers leaned against the walls, and even the elderly couple from the corner lot, who hadn't attended a meeting in over a year, were seated in the front row. It was packed wall to wall, the kind of turnout usually reserved for block parties or summer potlucks. Carol, the acting board chair since Regina's suspension, stood behind the folding table serving as the board's makeshift dais. Her blouse was crisp, her expression tight. She tapped the mic twice, though it was barely needed. The room was wired with tension. "We're here tonight to vote on the formal removal of Regina Jeffries from the HOA board due to conduct deemed detrimental to the community," she began, voice wavering slightly. "This includes a pending criminal case involving property destruction and multiple violations of the HOA's internal charter." A few murmurs rippled across the room. Carol raised a hand to quiet them. "She has been notified of this meeting and given an opportunity to attend. She has declined." That got more reaction than anything else. Not outraged disbelief. No one could picture Regina willingly missing a chance to defend her throne. Carol continued, "As outlined in our governing documents, removal requires a simple majority of attending homeowners. We will now open the floor for statements before voting." I stood first. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Everyone was listening. "I won't rehash what you already know. The security footage, the police report, the insurance settlement, it's all public record now. What matters is why it happened. It wasn't just about my car. It was about control. About someone deciding that their version of order was more important than our rights as homeowners." I paused, letting that settle. "She didn't just target me. I've spoken with over 20 of you in the last 2 weeks. People who've been fined unfairly, denied appeals, ignored. We let it happen because we thought we couldn't fight it. But we can. And we did." I stepped back. No applause. Just heavy silence, the kind that meant people were thinking. Then Harold stood. His voice was rough but steady. "I helped write the first version of these bylaws back in the early 90s. They were simple back then, 2 pages. Just enough to keep the place tidy and make sure the city didn't stick us with fines. What Regina turned it into, that's not what we envisioned. That's not what this neighborhood deserves." He looked directly at Carol. "You want to fix this? Start by removing the person who broke it." They handed out paper ballots. People filled them out in hushed focus, folded them over, and dropped them into the locked box at the front. 10 minutes later, Carol returned to the mic. The vote is 74 in favor, 3 opposed. Regina Jeffries is hereby removed from the Oak Ridge Pines HOA board effective immediately. A few people clapped. Most didn't. It wasn't that kind of moment. It felt more like the end of a hostage situation relief, not celebration. Afterward, as people filtered out, Maya tapped my shoulder. "You're not done," she said. "Removing her is one thing. Fixing the system that let her take over? That's the real work." She was right. And I had a list. The next morning, I submitted a formal petition to the board to review all bylaw changes enacted during Regina's tenure. I attached a spreadsheet of every documented complaint sheet issued in the past 5 years, color-coded by subject. Landscaping, vehicle violations, noise complaints, fence height. It was over 200 entries long. Tina, now more cooperative, called me that afternoon. "This is thorough," she said, clearly uncomfortable. "You're digging up everything." "That's the point," I replied. "And you should know some of these complaints? They weren't just unfair. They were illegal." She hesitated. "What do you mean?" "There's a trend," I said. "A pattern in the addresses. Over 80% of the fines and violations came from residents on the east side of the neighborhood." She went quiet. "That's the more diverse section," I added. "I never noticed that," she said quietly. "Regina did," I said. That night, I forwarded everything to Officer Delgado. He called me the next day. "You might be onto something," he said. "If the HOA was targeting specific residents based on demographics, that's housing discrimination. That's federal." He looped in the County Housing Authority. Within 48 hours, an investigator named Araceli Gomez contacted me. She asked for copies of the spreadsheet, the bylaws, and any correspondence I had between Regina and the board. I sent it all. A week later, residents on the east side started getting visits from investigators. Quiet, respectful interviews. Doorstep conversations. I didn't prompt any of it, they were moving on their own now. Meanwhile, the board was forced to hold a full bylaw review hearing. It dragged over 2 evenings, each lasting well past 10 o'clock. Dozens of sections were repealed. Others were modified to require full community vote before enforcement. The non-operational vehicle clause was not only struck down, it was replaced with new language protecting driveway usage unless visible hazards were documented by licensed inspectors. Harold was reinstated as a consultant to help revise the charter. They even proposed term limits for board members, something that had never existed before. 2 weeks after that, I got a call from Araceli. "We're filing a formal complaint against the Oak Ridge Pines HOA for discriminatory enforcement," she said. "This might go federal. Will it stick? We have the evidence." And more residents are coming forward. I thanked her, then hung up and looked out my window. The charger was fully repaired, gleaming under the sun. The mirror was intact, the fender smooth. But more importantly, I didn't feel watched anymore. And then something happened I didn't expect. A knock at the door. I opened it to find a woman I recognized, Miriam, who lived 2 streets over. She was holding a binder. "I heard what you've been doing," she said. "I was a paralegal for 15 years before I retired. I've kept every HOA letter I've ever received. You want to take this further? I think I can help." I stepped aside and let her in. We were no longer just cleaning up after Regina. We were building something stronger, something that would outlast her and anyone like her. And this time we had the receipts. The binder Miriam brought over that night was thicker than I expected, over 200 pages, each one neatly organized by year, violation type, and correspondence chain. She'd even flagged specific letters that bore identical phrasing, down to the punctuation, suggesting they were mass-produced without individual review. As we flipped through them at my kitchen table, I realized just how deep this went. Her records didn't just cover her own interactions. She'd collected statements from neighbors over the years, quietly archiving everything Regina and her inner circle had sent out. Miriam leaned over the table, tapping a tab marked 2019 Lot 48. "This one's important," she said. "The homeowners here were fined repeatedly for non-compliant exterior fixtures. They had hanging plants. That's it. When they couldn't pay, the board added penalties, then placed a lien on their property." I stared at the page. "They foreclosed over this?" "They moved out before it got that far," Miriam said. "But they couldn't sell for nearly a year because of the lien Regina placed. I helped them negotiate a release, but they were wiped out financially." I took a slow breath. "How many of these cases are there?" "Enough," she said. "But here's the kicker, look at the signatures." I scanned the bottom of the violation letters. Same name. Same flourish. Regina's. "She signed all of these herself?" I asked. Miriam nodded. "No oversight. No board vote. Just her." I checked the meeting minutes. None of these fines were ever discussed in session. That was it. That was the piece I needed to take this from internal policy failure to something far more serious. The next morning, I called Araceli Gomez from the Housing Authority and told her what we found. She asked for high residential scans. I sent everything. That afternoon, she called me back with another name, District Attorney Janessa Langford. "She's launching a formal inquiry," Araceli said. "If Regina filed liens without legal basis or board approval, that's mortgage fraud. Maybe worse." Langford's office moved quickly. Within 48 hours, subpoenas were issued to the HOA requesting all documentation related to fines, liens, and financial transactions for the past 5 years. I wasn't privy to what they uncovered, but Carol called me in a panic 2 days later. "She kept separate records," Carol said. Her voice was tight, like she was holding something back. "None of us knew. She had a private laptop she never let anyone else access. The subpoenas forced her to turn it over." I waited. "She used HOA letterhead to issue liens without filing them through the county," she continued. "She made them look official, but they were never recorded. She sent them directly to mortgage lenders. Some of them paid out of escrow accounts without verifying." My stomach flipped. She extorted people. Carol didn't answer right away. "The DA thinks she might have collected over $70,000 that never touched the HOA's official accounts." I didn't respond. That number echoed in my head like a dropped wrench in a quiet garage. "We didn't know," Carol added quickly. "I swear, we didn't." "You didn't ask either," I said. "That's why this happened." By the following week, Regina was arrested on charges of wire fraud, falsifying financial documents, and impersonating a public official. The mugshot made local news, her perfectly styled hair out of place, expression vacant. The HOA board scrambled to distance themselves, releasing an official statement filled with hollow platitudes about accountability and community healing. But that wasn't enough, not for me and not for the people she hurt. I called a town hall meeting independent of the HOA. We held it at the local library, which had a community room that seated about 60. Over 80 showed up. Harold helped coordinate chairs and Miriam brought printed handouts outlining proposed reforms. I stood at the front, behind a folding table with a sign that read Oak Ridge Accountability Committee. "We've all seen what unchecked power can do," I began. "Regina wasn't just a bully. She was a manipulator who weaponized our bylaws to exploit fear and silence. But this community isn't hers anymore." I pointed to a stack of forms. "We're forming a new oversight committee. It won't have enforcement power, it'll have watchdog power. Transparency, public meeting archives, and a direct line to the county housing authority." People started signing up. Harold took the floor next. "We're also pushing for a third-party audit of all financial activity since 2018. If this board wants our trust back, they'll give us that audit." They passed a petition that night with 87 signatures. The board couldn't ignore it. Within days, the audit was greenlit and a forensic accounting firm was brought in. Meanwhile, I took on a new project, rebuilding trust between neighbors. I helped organize a weekend cleanup event, not mandatory like Regina would have made it, but voluntary. People showed up, not because they had to, but because they wanted to reclaim the sense of community that had been missing for too long. A month later, I stood in front of a very different HOA board. The room was less tense now. The board had 3 new members, 2 of them people who had once been fined under Regina's regime. The bylaws had been amended to require community-wide voting on all future changes. No more backdoor edits. No more unilateral fines. Carol stepped down voluntarily, replaced by a soft-spoken man named Raymond who spent 15 years as a city clerk. He knew governance. He knew transparency. And most importantly, he knew when to shut up and listen. I didn't run for the board. I didn't want the title. I just wanted the change. The audit revealed another $30,000 unaccounted for. Some of it was traced back to Regina's personal bank account. The rest was gone, misused, misfiled, or simply vanished. The DA added additional charges to her case. She eventually agreed to a plea deal, restitution, community service, and 5 years probation. She was banned from serving on any HOA board in the state. The charger was long since repaired, but I kept the security footage saved in a folder on my desktop titled, "Just in Case." I never had to use it again, but I liked knowing it was there, a reminder that evidence wins when emotion doesn't. Miriam stayed on as the unofficial historian of Oak Ridge Pines. Harold joined the oversight committee. Maya, despite not living here, helped file a legal template for homeowners to use if they ever needed to challenge the board again. And me? I kept my driveway. No more notes. No more threats. Just peace. The kind you earn by standing your ground.